Welcome to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.
Do we really die only to be reborn into another life again and again? Until what or until when? If we get pancaked by a freight train tomorrow, could we wake up as a newborn kitten on Thursday?
Newborn kitten. Well, hey there, and welcome to the 109th edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. I'm Ben, and opening the show today was my co-host and partner in the paranormal, my dad. And before we get to those pressing questions about reincarnation, it's contest time. Nicole Preston from Charlotte, North Carolina, won last week's contest. The question was, what did the media call the mysterious big cat seen in Mansfield, Massachusetts area in early 1990s? Or in the early 1990s. The answer was the Mansfield Mystery Cat.
I was actually involved in that case, Ben. You weren't even born yet.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, exactly. Mansfield is only about 15 miles from here as the Mothman flies, in the middle of the notorious Bridgewater Triangle, the site of a lot of paranormal events for centuries. Now, in 1993, people started seeing a huge light brown cat the size of a Great Dane, strangely enough. Witnesses insisted that it wasn't a cougar, which supposedly had been extinct in New England since the 1840s. And I had just written something about my experiences in England with the so-called Beast of Exmoor in 1989. Somebody from the Massachusetts Environmental Police called me and said, somebody here read that thing you wrote about that lion in England. All right. Now, there wasn't much to go on, and others have gone more deeply into the case than I have, but I do remember the Mansfield fire chief at the time, whose name was Ed Sliney, telling me that he had laughed at the reports of the mystery cat until one morning he saw it across the road from his own house. So they never did find an explanation, but...
Isn't cryptozoology fun?
It sure is.
Okay, back to the questions. And the question is a little unusual this week. What bird is known as the ghost of the Arctic?
An ornithological question.
Yes. If you can deal with that, call us locally at 401-766-1240. Or from anywhere in the U.S. at 800-449-1240. If I don't announce a winner during the show, you still think you have a shot, drop a line to me at ben@behindtheparanormal.com. The winner gets an autographed copy of today's guest's book. It's time to simplify your soul's code.
Okay. Michael R. Hathaway, DCH, that's Doctor of Clinical Hypnotherapy, specializes in past life regressions to help people gain insights and update their abilities to their current life situations. He is certified through the International Board of Regression Therapy, is a board-certified fellow of the National Guild of Hypnotists, and is a certified hypnosis instructor. Boy, that would come in handy, wouldn't it?
Yes.
I can think of certain people. Anyway, he believes that every person has been given special psychic or creative gifts that have been developing over each incarnation. Dr. Hathaway is director of the White Mountain Hypnosis Center in Madison, New Hampshire, and the White Mountain Center for Creative Development, a nonprofit organization formed to help and encourage the development of every person's creative gifts. He has hosted a weekly metaphysical discussion group since 1994 and has 25 years' experience in psychic and paranormal research. He's the author of, It's Time to Simplify Your Soul's Code, which Ben just mentioned. Also, the Everything Hypnosis book, the only psychic power book you'll ever need, and A Complete Idiot's Guide to Past Life Regression. He lectures, that's a very famous series of books, actually. He lectures on many of the aspects presented in the books and performs hypnosis on stage throughout the Northeast. He also makes a daily inspirational podcast called Message from the Mountain. And his websites, www.michaelhathaway.com and www.whitemountainhypnosiscenter, one word, whitemountainhypnosiscenter.com.
Dr. Michael Hathaway, welcome to Behind the Paranormal.
Well, thank you very much for having me on.
Well, it's very good for you, and you sort of came on by sort of on this, almost not the spur of the moment, but at short notice. We had very grateful to you for that. So Ben is going to take us away.
Oh, I can, will, and shall. My dad was telling me that there are two ways to understand reincarnation: his way and everybody else's way. How do you define reincarnation?
I guess my son would say the same thing about me. Reincarnation is something that if we have a soul, and I always say if because everybody can doubt what I say, everybody's own experiences speak for themselves, but the belief is that there is an element called the soul. The soul is the connection that connects us back to the beginning of the universe. And through the process of the travel through time, the soul will go through different lifetimes for different learning. I sort of have been taught so far in ways that in the beginning, if that God energy, the soul is like just an individual form of energy, no physical form. And as it starts its migration and traveling through different lifetimes, all the knowledge of the universe is within the soul, but the experiences are not there. Therefore, we have the opportunity to gain the experiences to balance the knowledge so that when we become part of the old soul, the oversoul, that of universal energy again, we have completed the migration. In the meantime, I call God's sense of humor, which is...
I'm sorry, could you talk a little bit louder, please? We're having a little trouble with the audio.
Okay, I will speak up.
That's
Can
great.
You hear that okay?
Much better. Thank you.
You know, the problem is being a hypnotist, my voice goes into hypnotic form. So hopefully no one will get sleepy when they listen to this. Anyways, the idea is that at the end of the migration of the souls, all the knowledges come together with the experiences of the travel and the journey. But what I call God's sense of humor is free will. It means we can, if we have a plan each lifetime, we can follow that plan or not.
Okay. And Ben has another question?
Yes, I do. As the questions went at the beginning of the show, I'm going to stay. Am I going to stay human, or am I going to turn into an animal or cat or something?
Well, what do you want to be?
He likes cats.
I have a thing for cats. Yeah.
You can't get a better job than being a house cat.
There are different beliefs that we go through, not only physical migration, different lifetimes, reincarnation, but we also may be that animal form. There are people that believe that there are different planets on the cosmos, and I've had regressions where they would be different in human form, but would be from a different galaxy, so to speak. So it's, each experience is going to be different, and each person is going to kind of feel and know what it is. In other words, if you expect that, then you may wind up having that experience. How do you know what you know?
Right. Okay, well, we'll get to that in a minute, but I wanted to ask, again, you're joining us at short notice, and thank you again for that. And you were kind enough to send a copy of It's Time to Simplify Your Soul's Code. And I haven't really had a chance to get into it yet, but just could you tell us what do you mean by the soul's code? What is the soul's code?
Well, first of all, the soul is that of the element of your connection to the universe, as we just talked about. A code is a system, a sequence. Now, my feeling at this moment in time is that ancient man had a much closer connection to the universe than we have now. A lot of that has come through our experiences of almost polluting the concept. We're further and further away from that ancient connection. In other words, early souls had almost just a direct line right to the universe. It's still there, but we've complicated it with all our experiences. And the idea here is to just be one again with the universe while we're here, to just open up that line, to kind of clear away the clutter so that we have the opportunity of communicating directly more rather than going through all the complications.
Okay, could you speak up again? I'm
going to cup this phone. Is that better?
That's great. That's great.
Okay, good. So that, anyways, the goal is to have that connection of more of a purer form of communication with the universe.
Okay. And Ben?
Oh, yes. What is Project Earth?
Well, you mentioned Project Earth in your book.
I look at this as Earth's school. You know, is this the real home? Is there something in the universe that we're connected to? And we've all decided to come or been sent here for a process of learning, so that while we're here in this life, there's a whole set of lessons that we encounter. Perhaps they've been predetermined, as many people believe, a plan, a blueprint that we can follow. And so we're here, and while we're here, this is the opportunity to really learn and advance ourselves along our soul's progress.
Okay. Now, we're going to get into some questions here that will lead us to some of the deeper stuff we try to do on this show, because there are a lot of things that bother me about reincarnation theory. And I'd like to get into a bit of the history of it and this sort of thing. But first, how do you, quote-unquote, regress people? How do you hypnotize people and take them back to the so-called past lives?
Well, first of all, I know what you're saying about being bothered with the idea, because for a long time I did not necessarily agree with reincarnation, but through my experiences, which taught me that. Anyways, what I've learned is that we live our past lives whether we know it or not. So just the words that you use, the way you dress, the way you look, you're either caring for and liking memories from another lifetime or fears from another lifetime. In other words, we have these all the time. You also have, your mind is different than anyone else. So I, in the first place, learn how your mind works through your five senses. And so many of the regressions I do can be in simple conversation. My job is to step you into the images. And what we call hypnosis is imagination and communication. So your willingness to see or to know. But like, I'm non-visual, so I don't get pictures of past life experiences like you might get.
Oh, you personally?
I'm personally non-visual.
Yeah, okay. All right. So when you hypnotize, it's just, hypnotism fell into disrepute in the 70s when I was first starting out and in this field, and then they came back, and I mean, so you are convinced, obviously, because of your profession, that hypnotism is a legitimate way of getting at this information.
Well, we live in trances all the time. In other words, the
It's
minute
true.
you imagine, the minute you daydream, you've gone into a trance.
Sure.
So the access is there. It's just that people don't realize it's there. In the 70s, neurolinguistics, or NLP, had not really been born or invented yet. And that came through in the research on Milton Erickson, among others, where actually a new concept in hypnosis came out of the 80s called neurolinguistic programming. It's like model building the mind.
Okay.
Which is what I use a lot, not the old-fashioned hypnosis, which is authoritative. You know, you will go to sleep and look into my eyes, and that's the game you play when you're doing stage shows. But in this case, it's permissive, and my job is to help a person step into a natural trance that they already have.
Okay. All right, I see what you mean, but just moving from that, assuming that what people are telling you is true and that it's legitimate, and I have no problem with that. Do your subjects, when you have them under or in the state of hypnosis, in a regression, do they ever describe worlds that you don't recognize?
Yes, that's very possible.
Okay, can you do you have any examples of that, or
well,
ballpark?
They will look out and see, or they may experience being out in a different world. I've had them describe underground worlds, almost the transition of coming to this planet years ago, the existence of even different forms, a form that we don't really see ourselves as, so that all of these concepts, and I might add too that in Richard Sutton's research, the theory is that about 15% of all of his subjects, as he's been doing for 30 years, have experiences or recalls from otherwise than lifetimes on Earth.
Yeah, no, I found the same thing. Yeah, and again, I'm not passing myself off as an expert in reincarnation, but in 40 years of paranormal research, it does come up now and then. It's, you think certain things about it. So no, I know just what you're saying. Do you ever have people describe lives that appear to be in the future.
Yes, and some people prefer or ask to go into the future to see what lives are like. I personally look at, well, we're here now, and we have the opportunity, and we can focus on the past or the future, but it's taking our learning from the past that we apply in our life now that helps us go forward in the future.
Okay. Now you've just answered the way many regression therapists I've spoken to have answered, and it makes perfect sense. But it does lead to why I kind of question the maybe the smallness of some of the approaches that are often taken popularly to reincarnation. Now, let me start by saying, and again, this is your show. I don't want to monopolize here, but just get your reaction to my own theory. As Ben says, there's my opinion and everybody else's opinion. Essentially, I don't know. I don't think we're all prisoners of Western thinking. We're all children of Aristotle and Plato here in Europe and America and the Western Hemisphere. We like to pigeonhole things. We have a lot of trouble, despite all our lip service to Buddhism and Eastern thinking, we have a lot of trouble getting around the notion of the individual. And I'm always commenting, theologically speaking, that it's our spirituality, the idea that we are who we are, okay, in this body, if you'll use the classical sense, but we want to remain, say, Mike Hathaway or Paul Eno after we die, and we want to remain Mike or Paul forever. That's very unusual in human spirituality. But we all are, I think, are kind of tempered by that or tainted by it or whatever. So my point being that when we get into something like reincarnation, it just seems to me that we can't shake a lot of that thinking. To me, and from what I've seen in paranormal research, and again, I'm very different in my approach, voice crying in the wilderness, I think what we're seeing here is not successive lives, but parallel lives. And I know there are a lot of therapists, maybe including yourself, who agree with that. But I think there's a big difference. And the problem is that in physics, and Einstein essentially was starting with relativity and now into modern quantum physics, time as we know it doesn't really exist. There really is no past or future, objectively speaking. It's a function of our consciousnness. That's how we experience time. So naturally, when we have reincarnation memories and stuff, to me, it seems to me that's memories or experiences or apprehensions of lives we're already living, and I have all kinds of evidence for this. But again, not everybody sees it that way. But and I've always said, well, it's like 6 of one, half dozen of the other, the old idea and the new idea of reincarnation, past lives, parallel lives, so what? Still lives. And that's why I ask that, if there are any future life experiences that you've encountered. However, we have an email here that I'll get to in a minute that blows me out of the water on that. So before I get blown out of the water, and certainly not to do that to you, but what do you think of that approach? What do you think of the quantum approach as opposed to the 19th century approach, as I call it? Do you think I'm all wet, or what say you?
No, I never dismiss one or what anyone else is saying, because your sense of your reality, you already know these answers within you, just as I believe each person does. And I'm not trying to, even when I work with a client, I'm not trying to sell them past lives. It's an experience that if they find it useful and good for them, and it works and resolves something, they don't have to believe in it or not, as long as it works. And sometimes we just do imaginary stories. And they will work just as well as anything else. So consequently, I've had enough experiences to know that things are really, really connected. And so where and however they're connected from, I haven't been taught that completely yet. I'm like a student, so I don't dismiss the concept of parallel lives, just as wherever it comes from, it's the connection to different lifetimes.
Yeah. No, I've learned not to dismiss anything, too. I mean, I sometimes seem doctrinaire, but it's just to put the question. The whole idea of the self, again, is interesting, and Ben had a question on that.
Oh, yes, I do. I'm really into, Buddhist thinking lately. Seems to me that the Western mind likes reincarnation because we just talked about this. But in the Eastern mind considers, reincarnation a pain and tries to break the cycle. What do you think?
Well, I have done regressions on people for pains that the medical community has said are basically psychosomatic, that there's no reason for the pain. And when we investigate, I think of one with a pain in the shoulder, and going back and imaging a lifetime where they were actually shot in the shoulder, wounded, and died from that experience. And after they got an understanding of where the wound came from, then the pain itself stopped in their shoulder.
Mm-hmm. I've heard of many cases like that.
And what you have is you got your mind, your body, your spirit, and your emotional self. So consequently, a physical wound in a past life may manifest itself in a feeling in this lifetime from words. You know, a person may be wounded by somebody else's words, and they hurt in the same place that they were actually physically hurt from a different lifetime.
Okay. Well, this brings me to another thing that kind of bothers me, and you touched on it in the beginning in your intro, was the notion of I don't know, it just seems to me that in all of paranormal research in the West, there seems to be an idea that, going back to the ancient Greeks, going back to the idea that we're all brought up with, essentially that matter is bad and spirit is good. Right? That's not present in Eastern thought. And in my scenario, in the paranormal world that we work out of, matter is extremely important in the sense of the body. I don't believe that you are who you are without your body. And that's why in our scenario, the body doesn't die either. You know, and again, it's a long story we're not going to get into here, but the notion of reincarnation, that your soul can remember and be and say and do everything without the body, or the implication that that's the case, bothers me. Because, I don't know, there was, who was it, Aristippus, the ancient Greek, said, without our bodies, we're just ghosts, without our souls, we're just corpses. So, I mean, the whole thing kind of goes together. So, I don't know, what do you think about that? Am I wrong? Or, you know, I have a problem with the soul knowing everything without the body.
Well, the body is a very important factor in remembering. Let's put it that way.
Well, reincarnation, sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
And you have, so you have your physical form, you have your spiritual form, your emotional. I look at all of these different components of the soul and the traveling and how we manifest it in lifetime to lifetime in different ways, but you have characteristics that related to the past. In other words, that come through again. There might be a birthmark. There might be something else that appears. I mean, people have birthmarks where they had old wounds. So that there's a whole connection. So I don't see a disconnect between the soul and the body.
Yeah, I kind of see it throughout paranormal research, assumptions people make and this sort of thing. Well, anyway, we'll get back to this in a minute. We have so much more to talk about with our good friend, Dr. Michael Hathaway, hypnosis expert and reincarnation expert, and we'll be right back on Behind the Paranormal here on ON 1240, WOON 1240 AM. Stay with us.
New River Press is proud to sponsor tonight's segment of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Benjamin Eno. New River Press offers the best in unusual New Age books. Stand by the side of tonight's host, Paul Eno, as he battles poltergeists and helps suffering souls and families in the critically acclaimed books Faces at the Window and Footsteps in the Attic. Plunge deeper into the paranormal with Paul and learn about its influence on human history, its action in our daily lives, and its ultimate meaning for us in the best-selling Turning Home, God, Ghosts, and Human Destiny. Available now from New River Press, publishers of unusual books. Visit newriverpress.com, amazon.com, or your favorite bookstore. And set for release late this year in one of the most unusual books on the subject ever written. Paul gives us Dancing Past the Graveyard, What Ghosts Have to Say About God.
And we are back Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno on WOON 1240 AM and ONworldwide.com. And our guest this morning is Dr. Michael Hathaway, regression therapist, hypnosis expert, author, and we're going to talk more about his books a little bit later, but I wanted to just bounce a few personal stories off you, Michael, if you don't mind, from Ben and myself that might have something to do with reincarnation in some form.
You have my permission.
Okay, thank you, Ben. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
one of the things, and Michael, I don't know if you, we haven't met, but you come across as a very sweet guy, and I really look forward to working with you in the future. Do you have any children?
I have 2.
So you must have had this experience. When both Ben and his brother were born, this happened to me, and I sat down and I looked into their eyes, and I got the most knowing look from this newborn, and I said, wow, there's an awful lot behind this. And from the time Ben especially could talk, he would tell stories of being a soldier, of these, and his mother and I would sit there and listen to him. It was absolutely astounding. And I don't know, that it must be a common experience for those who may be aware of the ideas of multiple lives, I would think. I mean, did that happen to you too, with your children?
Well, my son did some soap carvings when he was about 5 that were really incredible. They were almost like Aboriginal, what he was seeing.
Okay, I'm going to have to ask you to speak up again. We're losing.
Yeah, okay.
There you go.
My son did some soap carving soap when he was about 5 or 6 that were really very Aboriginal in looking. They weren't anything that he would have related to in our lifetime. But
Okay.
he used to call himself the Brian, so that he gave himself a title. And he would say the Brian this and the Brian that.
Huh.
Our grandson, when he was small, he was riding with us in the car one time. He's small now. But anyway, he said, when I was a big boy, I used to like coffee. Of course, I wanted to know when he was a big boy, but by then he'd gone on to something else.
Okay.
So, yes.
It seems to be very. I hear it all the time from people, and then the popular wisdom on this is that as they get older, they forget. Did you forget, or do you remember?
Yeah, I don't remember anything.
Okay,
If
well,
I said I remembered, I'd be lying.
We'll have Michael regress you sometime soon. And
No.
Well, that would be fun. That would be good. And again, I have a feeling. Do you picture in your mind?
Yeah, I'm a visual.
You're a very visual person, are
Yeah.
you not?
Yeah, I'm actually really
see,
visual.
You're feeding me all kinds of information on you as I hear and listen to your word patterns, pick up in concepts. Very active mind.
I
So,
guess.
Oh, yes.
probably very creative. Do you write at all?
Yeah. Well, I'm not very good at art and stuff, but
he writes poetry.
Yeah.
He's written
Right,
short
so
stories.
how
He
do you
writes
know-
music.
I don't write.
My
Or you
question is,
play music.
I play music.
Yeah.
I'm terrible at it, but I play
So
it.
you play music. So how do you know how to play music?
YouTube.
Right? Do you hear it in your mind?
Actually, yeah, I do on occasion.
I know you have very good hearing. I can tell. And if your dad looks at your eyes when you ask him about listening, and probably sometimes when you're talking to him, Paul, he goes into it. He's very naturally going into a trance, so you're probably hypnotizing. But you watch his eyes, and if they go back and forth through his ears, then he's hearing in his mind while you're talking to him.
That's
so
very
it's hard
interesting.
for him to do both at the same time.
Wow. We talk a lot. We have a little corner of our library at home where we kind of sit, and there's a lot of power in his gaze and a lot of power behind those eyes. I think I just love to be with him. Anyway, let me.
So is that an old connection? As you say, you saw it when you were first born.
Yeah, oh,
Where
yeah.
did that come from?
Yeah. Where does it come from?
Well, that's my question is, how do you or how does anyone else know what they know?
I'd say it's because you're in touch subconsciously with all these lives you're living.
Yeah. So that's my question is, how do you know what you know? And then how do we remember what you know?
Well, I think that's my explanation. That's where our imagination comes from, memory. That's never been found in the brain. Physicists say that it's non-local. I think it's non-local because we're living all these different lives, and at some point or another, we are each other, literally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there we go. Let me tell you about one of my experiences, Michael, and see what you think of this. My first paranormal case took me to northeastern Connecticut. I'm a Connecticut native, and from the middle, the Hartford area. Now, up to Pomfret and Putnam area is maybe 35, 40 miles. It's a lovely area, and that's where we had our first case in an abandoned village where things were going on, and quite a remarkable case in itself. But since the first day I drove by a little cemetery in Connecticut on the way to this area, I felt drawn to it for some reason. And I'm not, I enjoy walking through cemeteries and looking at the old epitaphs and things like we have in New England here. But I'm usually not drawn to stop in these places. And years and years and years went by. I moved from Connecticut to the Providence area here, and so to see the family, my mother, and I'd drive back. So I drove by this place a lot over a period of about 30 years. Finally, one day, about 10 years ago, I said, I'm going to stop, and I'm going to see what this is about. So I was usually in a hurry, but I pulled into this little cemetery. I got out of the car, and I walked right over, around a stone wall, right to this one grave, and the guy's name was Reuben Marcy, and he died in 1826. And I said, that doesn't ring. Who the heck is this? Now, we're an old New England family. The Enos came over with the first lungfish, climbed onto the shores of New England, and sat there marrying everybody. But I think the only guy in that cemetery I'm not related to is Reuben Marcy. So, I mean, why would I be drawn to this guy? I have no idea. I looked him up. He was just a farmer, nobody special. I mean, why would this connection be so strong?
Well, it may be the fact that they have a soul connection to him. That's one of the things. The sensitive people that are open to getting messages from the other side. Maybe he's got something that he wants to say, or his soul has something that still needs to be said to you. So, I mean, there are a couple of different aspects or different ways that you could look at it. There is a connection. So that's the first reality is, okay, there's something here that's connected. So how do we investigate it more? What rings to us? What makes sense to us? Why is it that we feel the way we feel? And then we begin to let it unfold. It's like a mystery, and again, if everything is connected together, then it itself will unfold the way it should unfold.
Yeah. No, that's true. I mean, obviously, at some point in the multiverse, I always use the story of the two girls I happened to meet at Mount Ida College when I was speaking up there a few years ago, and they came up to me at the end and they said, and I was talking about human relationships in the multiverse, which is this parallel world thing. And they would say, how come we felt a connection, never knew each other before, registration day, looked across the crowded room, we've been sisters ever since, inseparable. And I said, well, at some point in the multiverse, at some world or other, somewhere, somewhen, you are each other. They knew exactly what I was talking about. It was all I had to say. Now, we have this email I referred to earlier from Bill Reynolds in Philadelphia, who I guess is writing to ask you this, Michael, but also kind of blows me out of the water on a certain point that I thought we've just touched on. And that's the importance of the distinction between past lives and parallel lives. Ben, if you do the honors.
Right. All right. I guess you can call me a disciple of Paul Eno. I think his multiverse ideas about the paranormal make more sense than any other explanation I've heard. But I do disagree with him on one thing. I've heard him say that past lives and parallel lives are 6 of one, a half dozen of the other. I think the past lives would be gone and done with, but the idea of parallel lives opens up huge possibilities for helping ourselves improve across many lives in many worlds. What I've heard Paul call the super self. What are Mr. Hathaway's thoughts on all this?
Yeah, the notion that, well, as he said, you can help yourself and others across parallel lives as opposed to past lives which are gone and done. I mean, do you see? I see what he's saying. And I'm a little humbled by it. What say you, Michael?
Well, what I say is, first of all, I think it's a matter of language. We may be doing the same thing, saying it different. It's very, very possible that the parallel lives, what I call past lives, could be the same thing. It's just how it is. In other words, let's start with a connection. Something is connected. So we start with that premise that there's something connected. Like, for instance, twin souls, twin flames. And there's a thought and a belief that in the beginning, the non-physical form is balanced. It's both male and female. And as the lifetimes progress and the physical form begins, then that soul is split into two different entities. And that's one is a male and one is a female, but they travel together through time and space from lifetime to lifetime playing different roles. And the concept of the past lives is that we're in a play, and there are certain souls that all travel together, and we play different parts in each one of our Earth or different place performance.
Kind of like these girls I mentioned.
Yeah,
Right.
And we have roles that, for instance, we carry with that, though, unfinished business from the past, karma, things that need to be or can be resolved in each lifetime to give us balance. And so the idea of that connection of those two girls that saw themselves, well, there was a knowing where it came from. There's a positive connection. There are also people that see each other for the first time that can't stand each other.
Yeah.
And where did that come from?
Yeah, exactly.
So you've got the good and the bad that flow through with that. And then you got to balance in, okay, so you have to fit this all in with what I call society. In other words, society's concepts, which society in my mind doesn't get it, traditional things, but we're set under the rules that we are expected to live by.
Yeah.
And so therefore we have to get each one of our interpretations in a way that people can accept or not. And knowing that we in our thinking may be different from somebody else. So, I mean, for a person to feel and think the way you do, I mean, that's pretty good. If you've opened up someone's eyes to discover something that's good and positive they can use in their life,
Yeah.
well, that's a pretty cool thing.
Yeah. Well, I hear you, Michael. I mean, society and language just put tremendous limitations on something that's illimitable.
Yeah.
Really. Okay. Now, to get back again to a little bit of the Western versus Eastern thinking here, I was... well, because I had this idea of sort of the super self. I haven't used that term very often.
Oh, like the Nietzsche. With it.
Right, yeah, that's fine. I don't use the term very often.
There you go.
You're not the most palatable guy, but anyway, anything everything said was wrong. But the idea, again, of the individual versus the greater self, okay. I think, as Ben mentioned before, those in the Eastern mentalities, Buddhists and think that reincarnation is a pain in the neck and is a cycle that needs to be broken in order to gain enlightenment, right? But Westerners, at least the popular New Age garden variety folks whom I often speak with, say, "Oh, this is great. At least it's better than some judgment without appeal, and I know that at least I'm going to survive." It's the survival of the precious self as opposed to a desire to get not with everybody, but very often in a popular. So, what do you find with that? I mean, do you find that reincarnation is something desirable to break the cycle of, or is it something that should be used and developed?
Well, because I hear you talk about, it seems to be in some ways the ego. The ego always needs to be satisfied with something that's self-important, that works with a person. That's that part of ourselves that needs some sort of recognition. To me, totalness, total oneness, and are we not all a piece of God, of whatever you define God, of the universe? In other words, are we a little piece of that energy of God that connects to something greater? So as we travel, it's how we almost lose ourselves, the individual of ourselves, which we are, but to be one with the universe allows us to be both ourselves as we are and exist, but also connected to the whole. Therefore, we can go through life aware of, we travel with a sense of oneness, but a sense of being an individual within the oneness.
I think that's very well put.
I don't know the right answer. Well, when I go into a trance and talk, my wife has a term for it. She calls diarrhea of the mouth. It just comes out. And
I've heard that from my own wife. Yeah, exactly. Well, very good. No, I like the way you put that. It's very, very clear.
I can add one thought if I can.
Please.
Because I grew up what I call a terrorized Baptist. Scared the daylights out of me as a kid. And seeing you have quite a religious background, and I knew that I just could not meet the standards that were put in front of me. And it wasn't until Star Wars came out, I mean, I always had a very strong religious connection, maybe a fear, but it wasn't until Star Wars came out that it made sense that the Force was there. And over my life, it's like being guided. And so the connection to hypnosis, being run over 20 years ago and given the gift of life, and my philosophy is, wow, I'm still here. I guess I got a purpose. So I believe in that purpose every day. So every day is like an adventure. Every day is learning. I'm just a child of the universe. So what I think doesn't really matter. It's what each individual thinks. But anyways, many years ago, being connected or finding out about Edgar Casey, visited the ARE. And while I was down in Virginia Beach, I went into the library. And at that time, I was ghost hunting more and wrestling with the idea of, well, the information comes from someplace, but is it past lives or not? And I went into the library, and the woman that I wanted to see was busy. With an old man there. This old man came over, and all of a sudden, the whole feeling, you know, when you get that head rush that something happened here. And he went on and gave me a little booklet that was published by a Jesuit priest back in the early 1900s on the information about the editing of the Bible and all the references to reincarnation being taken out. So I'm going, well, there's something going on here. What's happening and why am I being taught all this and shown all this? And so that began to change my view of something else. And then my own experiences, the things that have happened over the years, and looking back on things, you know, it's like we've been in a pattern of flow of learning. And so we take all these things and put it together. And running into some of my own past lives when I never thought that I would really experience them. You know, that's when all of a sudden your eyes open and say, well, there's something here. Well, is it parallel? Is it not? But it's happening when it's
exactly.
happening.
Yeah. That's well put. I'm glad you brought up the religious aspect, too, because very often on the show people hear that I have 10 years in the seminary, and they come after me when I don't embrace their religious beliefs, you know. And a lot of people don't realize that reincarnation is very present in some of the early versions of Christianity, and there were earlier versions of Christianity before St. Paul kind of corralled everybody into his way of thinking. And the Essenes, you know, people talk about the Dead Sea Scrolls and all these, the history of the Bible. The community of the Essenes were still rather mysterious, and to which some people think Jesus actually belonged personally, were believers in reincarnation. The Bible is full of references to what could be interpreted as reincarnation in Greek, in Hebrew, and in English, no matter how you read it. And all the way to some of the Jewish... I had a rabbi once tell me when I was studying Hebrew that reincarnation is essential to Judaism, which is something I never thought. So I'm sure you know all this, but other people might not. But it's very, very present in the Western as well as the Eastern mind. So, you know, if you belong to a religion that disagreed with it or that persecuted the thought, they should realize that it's in their own history.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, you're more knowledgeable because you've immersed yourself in that study for a long time.
Yeah, well, you think of the, not to get too biblical here, but throughout the Gospels, I mean, the Jews who are speaking with Jesus are constantly expecting the reincarnation of Elijah. You know, and they ask if John the Baptist was the reincarnation, you know, or not in so many, well, actually in so many words, yeah. So anyway, but that's maybe the subject for another show. So it is a concept that is pretty universal among, again, the Eastern and the Western mind. Okay, Michael, tell us about your books and what you're going to be working on.
Well, I was very fortunate, and again put together by the universe, I think, to get to do the Everything Hypnosis book a few years ago when I was contacted by a book agent over the internet, looking at almost as a joke, which was a reality, and had to immerse myself totally in writing for a period of time. And out of that came the Everything Psychic book, and I love, my world is filled with psychics, and so each one is my teacher, and a lot of my thinking is all that I've been taught. Then the Past Life book, The Idiot's Guide to Past Life Regression, which has done pretty well. And I'm working currently on a story that is fascinating. It's something I started 19 years ago, and I wished I'd known then what I know now, but we've been redoing the transcripts on the book. But anyways, the concept is it's of one person's experiences. We did many hypnosis sessions. It took her back, not into her own life, but found that her best friend as a kid was a ghost. Then we began to trace the ghost's existence in the early 1500s. And you talk about parallel time. Even as this book is coming together, the elements of the energy of that little ghost girl is still there. I did a lecture at a school recently on psychology class, and there was a girl with a gift of sight, and so I know who's behind me that people have told me. So I said, well, who do you see beside me? And she went on to describe that little ghost girl. So, so I know that the connection, if this is part of, and I keep saying, if this is my assignment, then everything will come together just the right way to put it together, to tell the story in the right way.
Yeah.
The weird part was when this woman went back, it's an English story, when she went back to England to research it, there were, she called it Historical Society because she developed through hypnosis a whole map and area of the town and the those girls' house. And they said, we don't have any information. They called her back, they took her telephone number, called her back an hour later, and said, lady, 6 boxes of material has just been delivered with everything you asked for. Now that's when you get into the point of the paranormal meets reality. Something happened that brought the material there within an hour of when she had made that call. 175 years later.
Wow. There you go. It's all over the place. We have one more email here that I think we can get to before we go. And this is from Miles J. in Boston. Take it away, Ben.
All right. How much can dreams tell us about our past lives? All my life, I've had similar dreams about different times in the day of an old man on a farm that looks like a long time ago. In one, I'm sitting at a table eating soup. Another, I'm trying to catch a chicken. The only exciting one is where I stand by a fence and watch some soldiers with tall hats ride by on horses. In real life, I'm only 22.
What do you think of that?
Well, that to me is, those are, yes, dreams have a very, very important part of memories from the past. And I've done, many people, you step a person inside of the dreams. And someone like that, if they can see it, all you can do is start a conversation with the right word. My job is to deepen the image, to let them imagine, to go inside of it, and then move them around in it. And to see. And there's several things I look for in a past life. One is I want to follow through to the last thoughts before they pass over. I want to see if there were trauma in that life. And not every past life has trauma. If there was trauma, I want to take them back before that happened and have them connect to that piece of their soul now, so that they can bring and draw back something good. The same thing with gifts and talents. If someone has a gift from the past, then we connect to it and then look at how we update it now so that it can be positive and good for them. And are they connected? Many people want to come for past lives to see if they were connected to other people in the past. So lots of times we'll look and see what connections, the soul connections are.
Well, there's so many other things we wanted to get into, identical twins and ancestral memory and things of this kind. But just briefly, could you mention the connections between certain people, as you say, traveling together? I find that fascinating.
Well, my group that I deal with that's come through here, and I've found that this area it's very old, and there's some very special energies. I look forward to when you get a chance to visit it. And we have connections, we have formations on the mountain that I didn't go to look for, but are all there. So it's like a piece of the scheme. So there are people that I know that we've traveled together with from the past. And one is actually a massage therapist that was a protector of mine in a past lifetime. And I remember doing massage on a place that really hurt in my back, and I'm going, yeah, it's an old wound. She said, yeah, it was a battle axe. She was there. She was seeing it. She was actually in a trance in the process of watching what was going on with me.
Wow. Well, there we go. Let me give you Michael's websites again. It's michaelhathaway.com and White Mountain Hypnosis Center, one word, .com. Michael, we are definitely going to do this again, and I want to thank you publicly for something we can't talk about yet, but you've been a tremendous help in helping us gather sources for a very interesting project that hopefully we will be working on together, you and Ben and me,
yes,
and some other people. And we can't talk about it just yet, but you've been a wonderful help, and thank you so much, and we'll be in touch very soon. I think you're a great guy.
Well, thanks. So are you. So Ben.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Have a good one.
Talk to you very soon.
Bye.
All right, bye-bye. Okay, Michael Hathaway, everybody. Dr. Michael Hathaway, White Mountain Hypnosis Center.com and michaelhathaway.com. So you don't want to be regressed?
Well, I do, and I don't. Well, as long as there's not like a large group of people around, I'll be fine.
Oh yeah.
It was just like a few people, because like school had like this hypnosis night thing, and I was like,
Really?
yeah, I'm not going to that.
Oh, a lot of people are very antsy about it the first time. I have had people try to hypnotize me, and it hasn't worked.
And it just didn't.
Yeah, I don't know why, and I was rather disappointed in that because my age, it doesn't not much that scares me anymore. But we'll see about that. Okay, we've got a few more emails, but we don't have any time. We're going to save them for tomorrow's show, I guess.
Yes.
All right. Let's see. I just wanted to remind everybody that we have our show reporters. We have 5 of them now, and we welcome anyone who'd like to be a show reporter. And what it is you just call in now and then. You kind of be part of the show and let us know what's going on in your own area, paranormally speaking. Can be UFOs, can be cryptids, or anything of this kind, ghost experiences that are going on. And we got 5 great people who call into our open line shows especially and let us know what's happening in their necks of the woods. They're from different parts of the country. We have a new fellow hopefully from London, and we want to let's go worldwide with this. I think it's a great way to participate in the show and to keep everybody up to date on what's actually going on. Another little announcement too: our show phone number has changed. I don't mean the call-in numbers, but the phone you actually use to call in the show when we're off the air. It has changed to 401-651-7732. 651-7732 in the 401 area code. And that is not for on-air calls. That's just to contact us off the air if you need to or want to. So again, many thanks to our producer. And we have Brittany Michelle back with us today. And we'll see you next week, Saturday, February 13th, right here on WOON 1240 AM and onworldwide.com at 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 Pacific. Our guest will be Dr. Kevin Ross Emery, an expert in using paranormal power to heal conditions like attention deficit disorders and many others. And Ben and I will be on his show, as a matter of fact, 9 o'clock Wednesday evening on parax.com.
Sweet, I kind of have ADD. Anyway, on our regular Sunday show tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 Pacific on CBS Radio and www.newsky.com, our guest had to reschedule, so my dad and I will do an open line show answering your phone calls / emails and taking updates from our show's field reporters.
We get a lot of good reaction to those shows. We've been doing a lot of them lately because I don't know, people have been, ever since we did that UFO show, we have guests and rescheduling. I don't know.
Once again.
But this will be the first one we've done on CBS, and we'll have a good time. All sorts of subjects come up. People call in. It's a lot of fun.
Yes.
And again, check our show website, www.behindtheparanormal.com, your local radio schedules for cities where we air. That's mostly Boston, Detroit, and Seattle at this point, and of course here in dear old Woonsocket. And on the internet, we're all over the place. Remember, you can get free podcasts of all the shows at that site, behindtheparanormal.com.
In the meantime, we leave you with a good thought from our great Buddhist teacher. I cannot pronounce that.
I believe that's Ajahn Chah.
All right, that makes sense. Why are we born? We are born so that we will not have to be born again.
That's the whole idea of not wanting to get stuck in the cycle of reincarnation, whatever it may mean.
I guess. I get what they're saying, though, because I had to study that last year for my religion class. It was world religions. I wish they taught more of that, because it's better than Christian religion. But
don't say that on the... Oh, dear.
Well, it's not better. It's just a different way of thinking.
There's a lot to Christianity that people don't realize.
Yeah.
Anyway, God bless everyone. We'll see you next time.